Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Loren Feldman. I'm here with Gene Marks to talk about the things we think business owners should be following this week. Welcome, Gene.
Hey, Loren, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to have you here. Gene, as usual, you've been writing about stuff that matters to business owners, including a piece this week about why the world is ready for baby boomer business owners to move on. I wasn't sure this one sounded like you. You're usually going after employees.
Yeah.
What were you thinking with this one?
I wasn't going after. It's tough love. You know, it's funny too because I was just talking with somebody from the American the AARP. What does that mean? The
Association of Old People.
That's it. Association of Old People. And we were talking about, because I was, we were talking about maybe doing something together. And then she read this article that I wrote in The Guardian, and she was like, I don't know if I want to work with you. You don't seem to like our members very much. And like that,
I'm not surprised.
Well, you know what? First of all, I want to be clear. I don't choose the headlines, okay? That was my editor, Dominic, at The Guardian, always like puts these words in my mouth. So the piece, the headline of the piece is called, Okay, Boomers, the small business world is ready for you guys to move on. So first of all, I also want to be, completely full disclosure here. I say you guys, but I was born in 1965, Loren, and I think the cutoff is 64 for baby boomers. So you could very well, put me in that same category of a baby boomer. We, businesses are owned by more than 50% of businesses in this country are owned by people over the age of 50. So that is that is a statistic from the Small Business Administration. There are a lot of boomers that are starting to talk about succession planning and exiting their business. And my point in the article is that we've done a real sort of shitty job of positioning our businesses to be transitioned on to people. I mean, just some of the statistics that you read. I mean, 86. This is according to one study that showed that 86 to 92% of companies are still writing paper checks. Paper checks, and I know that because these are my clients, we have technology platforms that are sort of, out of date.
Wait, do you have clients who have a CRM but also use paper checks?
Yes, of course. And they have CRMs, but they're using it like a glorified Rolodex. And the fact that I'm using the word Rolodex just tells you an example of who's listening to us right now, let alone who my clients are. And then the typical workplace of, businesses, they're still kind of stuck in the past. I say people still resist the flexible scheduling. They don't provide mental health coverage. They screw around with, health insurance, all that kind of stuff. And, my point is that, listen, guys, if you want to plan, this is an article on succession planning. It's like, if you are looking to move on from your business someday, 5 years, 10 years from now, you got to start thinking about that now. And if you want to create value in your business, you got to really address some big issues. I mean, I see this in my clients all the time. You've got to move your technology into the 19th century at least, you've got to update your employee practices. You've got to provide competitive benefits. You have to, refurbish your office. You have to redo what your inventory, clean out your inventories. There's a lot of things that you should be doing in your business to not only get your shit together, but also to build an asset of value. So you've got something to pass on. And the biggest thing is a lot of baby boomers, they want to cling on to their business. They don't want to move on. They want to get to the very end. And it's just hurting future generations. And I think we have a responsibility, for future generations to build that value.
Well, let me ask you this. There are obviously a number of different situations here that falls into the bucket you're describing. I mean, the SBA says there are 30 million plus businesses in America, but a lot of those businesses are have no employees. They're very small businesses. And similarly, with the businesses you're describing, some of them are businesses that really don't have a hope of creating a succession plan. Somebody has created a business, but the owner is too much a part of the everyday business to really pass it on to someone else or to sell it. And in some cases, it's what you just described. It's a lack of forethought. It's a lack of planning. It's a business that could have been turned into a sellable business. In other cases, it probably just isn't in the cards. Do you have a sense of how much of one there is and how much of the other? And are you addressing
Yeah, I would.
both types?
Yeah, I mean, there's about 7 million of the 30 million, 6 to 7 million are employer owned businesses, businesses that have employees, So
Yep.
you're absolutely right. I mean, 2/3 of that 30 million numbers, independents, freelancers, very small, whatever. And they're just going to be what they're going to be. They're going to die and the business is going to die with them.
But it's also true even of some businesses that do have employees, I believe.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. But then again, that's also not true for even people that might have independent businesses, because there are people that are independents that run, they're consultants, they're insurance company, insurance reps, they're sales reps that they actually do have something they could pass on to somebody if they wanted to sell it or pass it on to another generation. And the same goes with people that are, running employee businesses or employer-owned businesses. I mean, there's some value there. And I think not enough. And I know these guys because these are my clients. We all should be thinking of the future. We're all getting older. We're not getting any younger. And succession planning is a big issue with a lot of my clients. And it is becoming a hot topic among a lot of places where I go to speak. And if you want to, and it's succession planning it's all, first of all, people when they're starting up a business or in their 20s or 30s should be thinking about succession planning, an exit. But okay, I give them that there's other things to think about. For sure, people that are our age, Loren, or that they're the boomer generation, we got to be thinking ahead. And not enough of us are doing that right now. And, if you want to sell your business, you're not going to do it tomorrow. My smartest clients, they make plans for 5 to 10 years from now. Okay, run your business into your 60s, but you got to start making some investments now. You really do, into better workplace practices, better benefit plans, better technologies, better facilities. If you want to build something of value that you can one day sell. And unfortunately, I think a lot of baby boomers are not doing that. Instead, they're leaving a mess for future generations or undervaluing what they could be selling in the future.
Do you have a plan?
No, because my plan is, it's a good question. I built up cash in my business, and that is what my business is. My business has no value. I mean, I have receivables and cash. All of my clients are not under any kind of contract. So it's not like they have to stay with any successor going forward. So if anything, if I hand my business over to somebody, it's going to be to, somebody that would pick it up, and they're good luck with them trying to continue running it on because they're not me.
But you provide a valuable service. If you wanted to run it as a business with the goal of one day selling it, don't you think you could do that?
Yeah, I probably could. And Loren, you're killing me here because you're right. You really are. I'm sitting there pontificating here in the Guardian about all these baby boomers not building up enough value, and I'm just as lazy ass as everybody else my age.
Well, it's not. I think you're being too hard on yourself and perhaps on other boomers. It's hard. Sometimes
hard.
it's enough just getting through the day to day, let alone thinking 3, 4, 5, 10 years ahead.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think, maybe it's another topic for me to write on. You really make my wheels spin because it's not only just hard, but the biggest challenge that you and I don't want to speak for you, but the biggest challenge that people have my age and I have is that as we get older, we start, plateauing a little bit. You know what I mean? We want to take a little bit more time off. We want to start enjoying life, enjoying the fruits, kind of, we don't have the same kind of energy and drive and, all that we had when we were in our 30s. You know what I mean? So it makes it a lot harder for people of this generation to really put the effort into doing what that's needed to be done to build up value in their business. And I guess my takeaway is listen, if you're not going to do that, there's no law that you have to do this. I'm putting a gun to your head, but meaning me, we are leaving a lot of money on the table by not making the kind of investments that we probably should be making now. And a lot of people in our generation are at fault for that. And I think, as you rightly point out, me as well, I'm at fault.
You're right that a lot of it involves leaving money on the table, and it's kind of up to the owner to decide. The other thing that a lot of owners, I think about is, the time's going to come when they're done, and do they sell the business or transfer the business in some way that allows the employees to go on working at the business? And that's an interesting question. I've spoken with a lot of owners about this. The overall sense I get is that most owners feel they would like to create a situation where those employees get to keep their jobs, but they don't necessarily feel as though it's their obligation.
Right.
How do you think of that?
I don't think it is their obligation at all. I completely agree with that, but it is a way to do it, and that can lead into a whole conversation, which we should definitely have at another time, about employee stock ownership plans. I don't, to me, I don't want to give up any equity in my company, but depending on some businesses that are willing to give up some equity. Now is also a good time, if you're a baby boomer, to consider some type of a co-op or an ESOP plan, where you can maybe sell 25 or 50% of your company, or 40% of your company to your employees, to start that transition plan and start taking value out of your company, and giving your employees more of a say in the business. And that's another thing to consider.
It's funny you mentioned that. One of the regulars on this podcast, Jay Goltz, has just in the last couple months gotten really excited about the idea of doing an ESOP. And I think we're going to be talking about that a lot in the coming year, because he's really hot on it right now.
I'm interested in that also. I mean, I wrote about that for the Inquirer a few months ago, and I talk about it all the time. And I think it's for some companies, and Jay's company, I think, would be perfect for it. It's a really, really, it's an almost too good to be true kind of arrangement.
There are a lot of really attractive things about it.
There really are. I agree.
All right. Next topic. You wrote another piece about things you can do to better manage your relationship with vendors and suppliers. I think this was prompted by a Wall Street Journal story.
Yeah. This is prompted actually because the Wall Street Journal did write a story about Walmart. And I don't know if you were following this or not, but Walmart had like a big announcement from their CEO telling their vendors and suppliers not to raise their prices. It was literally
what you can do if you're Walmart.
Yeah, it was like, wow, it must be great to be Walmart here. You know what I mean? It was this guy, Doug McMillon, he warned the vendors, saying like, don't raise your prices on us. And it just made me like, wow, that's really, wouldn't that be awesome if we could do that too? So, okay, clearly we can't do that because we'd be laughed at in our face. So I do, it led me to think about some ways to improve relationships with your vendors. I mean, it's not about necessarily having them reduce prices, but having a good relationship with your vendors, particularly if they're a critical partner to your business, is super important, So, I wrote about the need to have strong communications with your vendors, obviously, both, through email, through your website, through, just ongoing things like that. The other thing is that it just drives me nuts, Loren. We must have talked about this before, is about how people, they monkey around with financing with their vendors. They don't get financing with their bank. So they screw their vendors by like extending payments,
Well, usually this comes up in the other direction. It's small businesses complaining that they don't get paid for months and months by big companies that obviously.
Yeah, those are right, because they're the vendors and they're getting screwed, So but I see also the businesses themselves like saying like a vendor's terms are 30 days and the business just pays in 45 days because they want that extra 15 days of financing, And it just drives me nuts. It's such a bullshit thing to do because you really piss off your potentially critical partners when you do. I mean, how would you feel if like your customers weren't paying you on time and then they come to you like in need of a product, for their customers? What are you going to jump to attention to help them when these guys have been messing with you, on their payments for years? So I just like to tell people that you should always be paying your vendors regularly and try to pay them either on time or take early discounts as well, because there's real advantages for doing that if your cash flow can afford it. And it's just, the more you can do to help out your vendors, planning ahead, helping them out with leads themselves, introducing them to partners and customers and people in your community. I don't know. You can't demand that they lower your prices, but there are a lot of things you can do to expand and accelerate your relationships with your vendors.
I don't know if that's going to keep them from raising their prices on you, but I think you make a very good case.
It won't. And I don't think it will keep them from raising prices, but I think it will keep them at least being loyal to you and delivering product on time. And at the very least, maybe giving a heads up. I mean, we're in an inflationary environment right now. We all know that prices are going up. It would be good if you had a close enough relationship with your vendor that they could tell you in advance, like, hey, we're going to have a price increase. We're just telling you now in 90 days. So at least you can, you motivate your way around that. The other thing, and then before we get off this topic, is I see a lot of my clients, Lauren, when they're talking about raising their prices on their customers, they're being very, targeted about doing it nowadays because they've got a lot of data. So they're protecting their margins and they're protecting their best customers. And they go after customers, they're raising prices on some customers and not raising prices on others. They're not just like having this overall price increase. So if you're like a really good customer, and I know some of it depends on volume, I get that. But if you're a good, reliable customer to a vendor and it comes time for them to raise prices, you may find yourself being on the better end of that price increase than other of their customers that treat them like shit. So, just to keep that in mind.
That makes sense. All right, last topic. The Washington Post published a story last week about a congressional investigation that found rampant fraud in the PPP program, the program that was designed to keep businesses alive and employees employed during the early stages of the pandemic. The report seems to place most of the blame on so-called fintech companies. They named Blue Acorn, Womply, Cabbage, which is now owned by American Express. I'm curious what you thought about this story. I'm a little concerned that there's a danger that some of the wrong lessons might be taken from this whole episode. But what did you think?
What do you say? Wrong lessons from what episode? What do you
from
mean?
The whole PPP program?
Yeah,
I think. I'll tell you what I think. The program was created right, at the time of the lockdowns. It was a somewhat desperate situation. The idea was to get money out the door as quickly as possible. And I think a deliberate decision was made to do what it took to get the money out, knowing there would be some fraud. I mean, there's always fraud. Under the best of circumstances, there was going to be more fraud. People knew it. They decided it was the right thing to do. And even now, looking back, I kind of think it was the right call. After the fact here at this point, obviously we should go after the fraud, and whoever's guilty is guilty, should pay the price. But I hate that. I'd hate the lesson to be learned from this, that the whole program was a mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't know if anybody would think that the whole program was a mistake, but I can tell you this much. There was a lot of fraud, way more fraud than what even gets reported in the media, because, I know personally from my client base, Lauren, that many, many, many businesses took PPP loans that didn't need it. They in the end, it was supposed to be based on need. But what happened was the program was launched in like March and April of 2020, when we were all shitting ourselves about COVID. And the eligibility requirements were basically like, ask and you'll receive. If you say you're going to need it, we'll provide it. You know what I mean?
I think you're right about that. And it wasn't just the PPP money. I mean, there was, the EIDL loans. There was the employee retention tax credit that a lot of companies got and maybe didn't even really need.
Yep.
But even there, it was an unusual circumstance. Let's hope. And I think the decision was made to err on the side of sending out too much money rather than too little. And
I agree.
I think maybe that was the right decision.
You're right. I forget if I touched, I interviewed, I had a good half an hour interview with Marco Rubio like a month or two ago, and I wrote about it. And the whole thing was about PPP and how he developed it. And that was a very bipartisan thing. Everybody got together. It was a crisis. And it was really interesting. And he said the same thing. They were expecting there to be fraud. I mean, you can't put $1 trillion out and in the market and the SBA was overtaxed to begin with. They didn't have the resources. So, they just kind of knew that there was going to be fraud, but they had to do something. They had to get the money out. And I think in the end, what it did though is not only did it provide those funds, which was really important, but it provided this level of credibility and to the business community that the business community needed to hear from government at that point of time. The mistakes during the Great Depression were that the markets contracted and the government did not provide any liquidity, and all these banks went out of business. And those mistakes were not made this time. The government provided liquidity in all sorts of forms, unemployment insurance, programs for banking, as well as PPP and EIDL. What it did is it not only gave us cash, but it gave us confidence. And I think there's a psychological benefit to that. And I think when you're doing that, you're going to have fraud. It's inevitable.
There's fraud in every government program, no matter how well thought out it is. The other aspect of it that I think is interesting is this report really singles out these so-called fintech companies. And I wonder if they're not being scapegoated a little bit. I mean, I have no love for these companies. Right. I got fired by one of them, in fact. They were, as the report makes clear, they were the middleman in this situation. They were finding businesses, it was easy to find them, that weren't being helped by the big banks. The big banks had no interest in helping them. These fintechs got them together, helped them create applications, do it. They automated the process, and they hand delivered it to banks. And as I understand it, I could be wrong about this. There's probably a lot that I don't know, but I think it was the banks that had the final decision on whether to approve or not approve the loan.
They did. And they were making these decisions based on incomplete and changing rules as well. And the bottom line is, though, is that, were there any laws broken here? I mean, did these fintech companies, did they behave unlawfully? I mean, they were following.
There may have been. I don't want to rule out that possibility. The report did have some language that did make you cringe. I mean, there were people inside a couple of these fintechs who saw this situation for what it was, which was for what they saw it as an opportunity to make huge fees for doing relatively little work. But it was the government that set the fees. It was the banks that approved the loans.
Agreed.
Unless I'm wrong about that somehow. I don't think all the blame goes.
Well, it certainly won't be the last time that people in the financial services industry get huge fees for doing a little bit of work. You know what I mean? So, like you just said, they were following the rules and the fees that were prescribed by the government. I don't think that they broke. I really don't think that they broke any rules or broke the law. And you can't put somebody in jail based on their intentions. I mean, people, they have a right to earn money if it's within the law to do that. And that's exactly, what they were doing. I just don't, it was the same controversy back during PPP when people like Danny, what's his name, the restaurateur,
Danny
Meyer, and like all these other guys with like zillions of dollars were getting PPP money, and they had a PR mess on their hands because they had the money. They didn't have to get the PPP money, but they weren't breaking any laws. They wound up giving it back.
Right.
And then the government wound up, changing some of the rules based on what happened. But at the time, they weren't breaking any rules. They were entitled to the money. It just looked terrible that they were taking it. And I think it's the same thing with the fintech companies. Maybe you can say like they were greedy and giving the money out everywhere, but at the same time, like I don't see where they were breaking the law. So, we'll see.
All right. I hope more of this comes out. I think it is important to understand what happened here so that, we're better prepared for the next time something like this happens.
I agree.
Gene, working on anything we should know about coming up this next week?
Yeah, I'm gonna write a piece for the Inquirer about hiring interns, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. I've got a couple of technology pieces on the way for Forbes. On some new techs to be considering for 2023 as well. And I've also started writing for the Chicago Daily Herald, and I'm going to be interviewing a bunch of Chicago business owners about what their remote work policies are. I'm forever interested in what companies are doing with remote and work from home workers. So
you being a long-time practitioner.
Yes. So just always interested to see what people are doing.
I'll be eager to see that as well.
Good.
Gene Marks is a CPA who writes weekly on small business for The Guardian, The Hill, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and now the Chicago Daily
Herald. So Loren's like, what's that?
I'm always happy to hear of a new publication. It's usually going the other way. You can also hear him on ABC Radio's Eye on the World with John Batchelor. Gene hosts 2 small business podcasts with Paychex Corporation and The Hartford. Thank you, Gene.
Thanks, Loren. We'll see you next week.
Appreciate it. Have a great week, everyone.